Well, happy Markcast. What are we, Wednesday here? Busy day. Welcome to the first part of our doubleheader today. Should be exciting talking CFL Week 15 and then lots of news on the XFL front. Another merger here. I was just telling like we've lived through this before. Nothing new here. Here we go again. Jim Carrey and that, what was that? Me, myself, and Irene or whatever. Here we go again. I think that's going to be the theme for Friday. Should be excited here. But first, we are talking CFL. We have Jason and Evan here. Midweek, Jason, how's your week going?
Pretty good. I mean, the weekend was great. Really great weekend of football on both sides of the border. So I'm happy from that perspective, and my week's going pretty well so far.
Evan, I know we have lots of other things we'll get to. XFL here at 4:45 Pacific. How's your life going here, CFL and otherwise?
Yep, it's been a busy week, man. Lots of news coming out on so many different fronts. I think I've touched every league this week to some capacity, but sticking to the CFL, excuse me, got to be careful there. Sticking to CFL, what this, obviously what this stream is about. It was a great slate of games over the weekend. I think I was pleasantly surprised. Every game I felt like was really close, and this was the first weekend in a long time where I was actually able to sit down and watch, every game since it was equally divided up between Friday and Saturday. So it worked out really well, and I was very pleased with the football that was played.
Yeah, and again, late this week, I appreciate everyone. We've made the commitment. I feel it's important to do this every week on here. I had to work Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, all day, every day. So this is the first time we could do it today. Evan's got class. I appreciate it. I think it was Tuesday last week and Wednesday this week, but darn it, we've made a commitment here. I had a great weekend. The Commanders at 2-0 here, left hand up. I don't want to hear any of that hating on that. Taking down Russell Wilson, and then the BC Lions. I really was about to. Mariners got swept by the Dodgers at home. BC, I thought was going to get, I said, you cannot lose to Ottawa at home. This is a must win. Looked like they were going to until about the last few minutes. Jason, are we, after Labor Day, games counting more? Are you feeling like the CFL is peaking at the right time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just compare it to the previous two seasons since we came back from COVID, and this season has easily been way more exciting than 2022 or 2021. I just think we've had so many more close games and dramatic finishes down the stretch, and a lot more offense this year just in general. So I think it's been great from that perspective.
Yeah, Evan, I feel like this is kind of what was promised all along because we all got into this obviously during the other merger talks. And, the 2021 season was a little sleepy, I think. And as much as CFL apologists want to say, hindsight, whatever, are you feeling? You said you sat down, enjoyed the whole slate of games. We had the dueling doubleheaders. You felt like everything worked out?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked a couple times this season about how I feel like there were peaks, and this was the best football that we've seen since, CFL came back from COVID and the canceled season in 2020. I've been really impressed. I feel like in this third season back, teams are finally getting things together. And of course, I think we still know who the top teams are, and we still know who the bottom teams are. I don't know if that's changed too much. Well, Toronto's, I think, definitely been a surprise, but, Winnipeg's still there and all that. So, some things I think have stayed the same, but ultimately, there have been a lot of surprises, and there's been a lot of shakeups. A lot of the season, even though there's only 9 teams in this league, a lot of it has been extremely unpredictable, even for, I think, people who have devoted more time than myself to covering this league and have been a fan for longer. So yeah, overall, I've been very impressed. And I think, this is, we are sort of peaking again. Like this season has been the best since COVID. And I don't think it's necessarily close.
Yeah, so let's get into this. So, I'm looking at the standings here, obviously, and I was filming. I do work for a elderly service provider. They do they do transportation and meals and housing and all that. So they have this game on, and they were going to do, they had like cornhole, and you could do like giant, chess and Jenga, and they had bands and stuff. And I think they probably expected, a few hundreds of people to come, and there was maybe 50 people there. So needless to say, by about the third or fourth hour of this event, I had a little time on my hands. I had my phone mounted to my camera walking around, turned on because I'm kind of tracking the score for the first little bit of this Winnipeg Hamilton game. And then I'm like, what the heck is going on? I turned it on. I guess we'll get to that game, in full, but it had so many ramifications leading into this BC game. Jason, did you think that BC was going to take advantage of kind of the Winnipeg loss? I mean, it really did seem like kind of a weird outing for BC.
Yeah, I mean, they just kind of, saved their chance there. I think what you call it, like it didn't look like they were going to take advantage of that until those final few minutes where Ottawa really just gave the game away to BC. I got to give the BC credit as well, but I mean, at the same time, it looked like the Lions did their best to try to give this game away through 3 quarters, and then ultimately they turned it on in the fourth, and BC scored 23. You see that right there on the screen, 23 fourth quarter points. Yeah, you're not going to win many games if you're Ottawa if you do that.
Yeah, Vernon here, a little bit of a messy game, 3-3. Evan, like I said, I started watching this game after the Winnipeg, literally turned it off kind of in disgust and then had it back on at the bar, kind of seeing that, the final 3.5, 4 minutes of that. What did you make of this game overall?
Yeah, well, very rarely do I turn off a game, early. I always, like to ride things out, stick it through. But I just had a gut feeling this game was over when Ottawa had that pick six. I think Vernon, if I remember correctly, had an interception, and then I think he threw another one and ended up being a pick six. And then after that, I was just like, you know what, I think this game's over. And usually I'm right. Usually whenever I turn a game off that feels too out of reach, I have been correct in the team who was leading wins. But this was a rare exception where BC just had some sort of fire in the fourth quarter, and they said, you know what, Hamilton, blessed us in a way with their, win over Winnipeg, and now we're in a position here to really, make things interesting late with the standings. So they really took advantage of that, and hats off to BC, for getting it done at the end. But I think really the main storyline coming from this game is it's another Ottawa collapse. We've seen this happen so many times where they just can't finish, and it's unfortunate. Bob Dice, who's a coach, been in the CFL for a long time, somebody that I very much respect. But you just can't have that. You just can't do that. And a loss like that is a loss that will, that can cost you a job. That's a real red flag, I guess you would say, on the resume or on the slate. And it's not the first time that, that something like this has happened to Ottawa, but this was definitely, I guess, one of the ones that happened in more dramatic fashion. I think we can all agree, BC pulling this out. I don't know what the odds are. I don't know what the percentage was, after Ottawa went up, whatever it was, 37-20 or something. I don't know what the, odds were that they were going to win, but I have to imagine they were pretty damn high. And, I was honestly stunned when, I had turned the game off by that point. I was watching, college football by then. I put on another game, and, I was talking to Andy, and he was like, yeah, man, like BC's right back in it, like they, the decision again, and this is not the first time there's been a specific questionable coaching decision. Sorry, I can't speak today. On behalf of Ottawa and their coaching staff, where they, they kicked that field goal, the 50-yarder, I think it was, and kicker misses, and then the ball is returned all the way back for a touchdown. And as a coach, that's kind of like the ultimate facepalm moment, and that was what really, more than anything, spearheaded the BC comeback. I think that was the point in the game where everybody knew, like, okay, there really is a chance now. And ultimately, they went on to win it with the Lucky Whitehead, touchdown. And that was that. So very surprising game. Definitely, I think more disappointing for Ottawa. If you're BC, great comeback win, but you know that the game shouldn't have been that close, and you definitely escaped with one. But yeah, honestly, I was amazed that they were really able to pull that off, and it says a lot about that team's, I think, culture and ability to win in tight moments. BC has been criticized more on the road, I guess, than at home this year when it comes to certain games where they just seem out of character, and you're not really sure what to make of them. But I still believe this team, can go to the Grey Cup, and this game proved it to me with the way that they played at the end.
Yeah, I have a couple questions, and obviously, my minute recollection of all of this game is a little taxed right now, especially after the weekend and working and whatever. But to have a couple big picture things, because the two takeaways from this was it really feels like this is the first time that people are calling for Bob Dice's head here. It's calling and like he's in the hot seat, and we've had discussions on here, and he came in last year, and you've got no Mazzoli, and he's trying to right the ship, and people gave him a lot of credit. I interviewed him in the offseason and the CFL media day, and even this year, you're like, okay, well, you're fighting through everything, and you're losing Mazzoli, and Arbuckle didn't work out, and Tyree Adams, right? Am I right? Like that didn't work out. Now we're on to this. This play, Bob Dice was a special teams coach. Like, that is kind of the first blunder of this. But Jason, like, it feels like the tide has shifted here where people now are kind of anti Bob Dice. Am I missing, was this before now, or is this really where it started to come out?
I think now there's starting to be some heat under Bob Dice's seat in Ottawa. But I think the thing is, when you look at this and the struggles that the Red Blacks have had, they've had multiple general managers, multiple head coaches, multiple starting quarterbacks during this 4-year period where they've been just so bad. I mean, without having that 22-game home losing streak, we would have been talking about Ottawa since the beginning of this season, and just the season struggle they've had. And I mean, just epic fails this season and failing to close games. They've been a very competitive team for a lot of this season, but I think at the end of the day, the game I went to, Montreal and Ottawa, they had 11-point lead with 4 minutes left. They blew that one. This one, there've been other games they've been in that they haven't been able to close out as well. So they could have a much better record than they have right now. And I mean, obviously, they've had some bad luck with the quarterback injuries, but you can look around the rest of the league and say a lot of other teams have had that bad luck as well. So, I think the Red Blacks, the hot seat is heating up for Bob Dice.
Jason, let's see if your internet's peaky just a little bit. Let's see if it catches up here, Evan, because that's the thing. Like, we deal a lot with this, and especially like the USFL or USFL and XFL. But you had a lot of like Terrell Buckley this last season. Like, hey man, I had to build a team from scratch. Like, it was really hard, and you're like, yeah, so did every other head coach. Like, this is not a unique problem. And like Jason said, that's a great point. Obviously, Ottawa's had the injury bug, especially at quarterback, but other teams have been able to navigate that. Evan, thoughts on Bob Dice? I know you said high on him, but do you feel like kind of the walls are closing in on him a little bit?
I do, and it's more because Ottawa has just struggled so much. I feel like, people might not be calling for his head as much if Ottawa wasn't going through such an extended rebuilding period. And maybe had they won more before, we wouldn't be sitting here right now talking about his job being at risk. But again, football's a winning business, and that goes without saying. And Ottawa has had their fair share of controversy, to say the least, not just this season, but over the past couple seasons. Really, since they've returned again from that COVID year, there's just every year it just kind of feels like a disappointment. And I can't imagine, I have, again, a lot of respect for everybody in that building. I know they're all great people, but when you don't win games, it's just harder to have a happy atmosphere. And Ottawa, again, there was a point this season where everyone was really high on Ottawa. It looked like they could go to the playoffs. They could stun everybody, the crumb sanity that we always talk about. Now all that is long gone. Now it's back to, I might have said it on the show last week, but it's just kind of like you already feel like, you're getting ready for 2024. Yes, there's still a couple weeks to play in this season, but it almost feels like, the white flag has been waved. And that was really what I felt like when I watched this game. It was like such a winnable moment. I mean, for a team like that to go on the road and win against one of the top teams in your league that's not, in your division, is a really big deal. That was going to be a monumental win for Ottawa. And to be honest, had they did pull that off and BC just kind of stagnated in the fourth quarter, I would probably be, talking about a completely different thing right now. I'd probably be saying, what, Ottawa still has some firepower in them, that they still have a drive and a motive. And I understand that there's good players there, but right now it feels like there's still pieces missing to that puzzle. And I don't know. I don't know if change is the right answer because they've already had so much change, and you can only change a team around so much before it just becomes a mess, and it might not necessarily improve the situation. So we'll see what happens. Definitely a team to watch. And again, one of these teams where I'm really interested to see what they do in the offseason, particularly with, free agency and again, possible coaching changes. Who knows what happens with the front office. There's a lot that goes on there when you don't win. But, I agree. The excuses, I think, are kind of running out. Yes, you've had a difficult season. You've lost some people that you thought were going to, turn things around. But as a football team, you're supposed to win. You're supposed to find ways to win, and other teams have been able to do that. I mean, you look at Hamilton. There was a point in this season where it looked like they were going to throw in the towel as well and just kind of move on to 2024. But I'll talk more about them later. But ultimately, because again, I've always thought that they had better personnel and some better experience. Like they still have a lot of concrete pieces there from the times that they were in the Grey Cup. They still had an opportunity to turn that around. And now it looks like they're a playoff team. They're coming off a huge win this weekend against Winnipeg. I thought that was one of Hamilton's best games of the season. And again, we'll get into that in a minute, but just bringing it back to Ottawa, it's, I understand things are tough, but, football's a winning business. And the CFL season, in my opinion, is long enough to where you should be able to turn it around if you are struggling. And unfortunately, they have not been able to do that so far.
Yeah, like I said, I like the Bob hiring. I know that there was a lot of, he came in, and I like the idea of, the guy that was elevated, that's kind of been able to right the ship as much as they can during the season to get a full shot kind of the next year. Okay, let's do that. Let's not hire in. I saw criticism and Bob Dice is a lazy choice or but I don't know. I mean, I think you got to give him this season. I think, like we said, he's had a lot of different adversities to work through. My other question, and we'll go Jason, we'll see how your internet is, or else we can figure that out. Did BC finally wake up here? Because I feel like we've kind of been in the fog for about a month, and I would just like, it kind of felt like maybe they finally got their head in gear and like, oh, we are, because this was a gift. Winnipeg losing was a gift. Okay, let's at least be able to get one game on them. I'm watching the Mariners right now in the AL West, and you're hoping when the other team loses that you're going to be able to capitalize. And I was very afraid that, like I said, I think the optics of a now 3-10 team, beating you at home, this unbeatable defense and Donut Boys and Ryan Phillips and all that. I think the publicity around that would have been quite bad. Do you think BC finally woke up here?
They're such a weird team because I think they're a team that's capable, of beating any team in this league. We saw them go in Winnipeg, win convincingly, but they're also a team that's capable, like what we saw this past weekend, a couple weeks ago against Hamilton, losing to any team in the league. So I think at the end of the day, BC, they're just a strange team to try to figure out because they're never truly out of a game because they are capable of making a lot of big plays. I mean, like Justin McInnes had a massive game in this one. He's really like their 5th or 6th best receiver when all their guys are healthy. And I mean, it really just shows you the depth of offense. And I mean, if Vernon Adams can avoid the turnovers that he had in this one, because I think that's the only thing that really kept this game close and really gave Ottawa that lead. So I think at the end of the day, if Vernon can avoid those turnovers, which have plagued this season this year, I think this team is right in the thick of things to get first place in the West. And I mean, that's a huge game coming up in a few weeks.
Evan, has BC, do we just not run the ball anymore here? Like, if we just completely, if we traded James Butler, Vernon, we just throw it all over. As long as he gets 300 yards, we got Mizell here, 13 yards rushing. I mean, Vernon scrambling. This is insane to me looking at the stat line.
Well, it's a couple things. I mean, I think losing James Butler in the offseason has proven to be a very significant loss given what he's been able to do in Hamilton. And he's really, carried a large portion of that offense throughout the season, or at least up until, Taylor Powell has found his stride. But, I think this game was a bit different. Typically when you're playing down that late in the game, you're not going to be running the ball that much. You're going to rely on the pass game and throw it more. You see this really in any level of football, whether it's NFL, college, anything like that. So it doesn't surprise me, especially because BC has their entire offense, I feel like, has been a pass first system for this entire season. You can't not throw it given the receivers they have. Keon Hatcher, Alex Hollins, all of our favorites. So. Yeah, I mean, you could maybe argue that Mizell should be getting a bit more work, but in this game in particular, I just feel like, there was no point in running the ball, when you're down, however many points, 17 or whatever, going into the fourth quarter. So it's something that's up for debate, but personally, I feel like, they're fine doing what they're doing, and obviously they were able to win the game, just kind of throwing it and then having that boost on special teams with the return touchdown.
I think that was all the funny tweets I have for this. Farhan was on the call. He, good for him, and being able to be there live and call that. The 19-point fourth quarter comeback, the largest in BC Lions history. Jason, anything else on this one? Because I want to deep dive this Hamilton Winnipeg situation. Anything else from you?
No, I think let's move on to the next game.
Okay, so we had here. Let me get out of this. I'll reset. Like I said, so I'm filming the old folks get together here, listening to the Hamilton, because I'm like texting the group chat, like, what the heck is going on? I'm tracking the score. I got my sofa score, whatever going on here. Winnipeg falling to Hamilton. Jason, were you at this game, and what was this like?
Unfortunately, I had something to attend to that day, so I had to watch it on TV. But I mean, I was just as happy watching it on TV as I would have been if I was there. Because I mean, what a performance from the Ticats! Totally unexpected. I mean, something weird about Winnipeg playing in Hamilton. Zach Collaros is actually the last Ticats quarterback to lose to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at home. That's been quite a long time since Collaros played for the Ticats. So. I mean, just something weird happens when Winnipeg travels to Hamilton, but as a Ticats fan, I'll take it a victory.
Evan, what did you make of this one? Jason, let's see if we can get you logged off and log back in here. Evan, like I said, I just couldn't believe this. I turned this on. It didn't, to me, Winnipeg always kind of feels like, okay, we can work our way back. We can work our way back. It really felt like this lead was safe, even if the score was a little closer at the end.
Yeah, this game was a surprise, and I watched the full thing, and the entire time I just kept telling myself, Winnipeg will find a way. They're going to find a way. They're a winning team. This is not a game that they can lose. It just didn't seem like, I don't want to say it didn't seem like a losable game for them, but again, we've seen what they're capable of doing. They're one of those teams where every time you think that they're going to let something happen, they don't. They come right back in it. There's a big play, and they kind of pull through. But Hamilton just kept going. They kept finding things. I thought one of the most interesting plays of that game was, I think it wasn't a missed field goal. It was a missed extra point, and then Tyreek McAllister returned it all the way back for 2 points. I thought that was a very, I guess you could say, pivotal play in the game, even though it was only worth 2 points as opposed to 6. But, things like that really just, I feel like it was the little things in this game that, killed Winnipeg in the long run. And I wouldn't say it was an outstanding performance by Hamilton. I feel like it was, obviously they did enough to win, but I don't feel like it was anything, it wasn't a blow your socks off type of game. I mean, yes, they beat Winnipeg. Obviously, that's a big deal given, Winnipeg's past. And I think there is a bit of maybe bad blood between those teams, given the 2 Grey Cups. And I'm sure Hamilton is, they definitely feel probably disrespected, considering that Winnipeg beat them twice in the Grey Cup. And again, one of them was at home. So that makes it, that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, I was impressed by Hamilton in this one. And the fact that they were able to win this type of game further proves my point that I made several weeks ago about how I thought that this was going to be the surprise playoff team. Because again, it all comes down to, experience. And again, I think it goes without saying, Hamilton's roster, while they might not have performed well at all points throughout the season, it's been very up and down. I feel like they just have so many different dynamic playmakers. Like, they have on paper one of the stronger rosters in the league. And again, that's why I still viewed them as one of the top teams going into this season. There were a couple, things to be concerned about. And I think some of those issues were amplified throughout the season, but Hamilton's rolling right now. I feel like they're in a really good spot. I feel like they're confident, and maybe there's some chance, some way, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but hey, Grey Cup's going to be in Hamilton. We're all going to be there. It would be really cool to see that team at home in the Grey Cup again. I know Jason, for one, would probably enjoy that. But again, there's no guarantees. Again, I'm not gonna make any predictions like that. But ultimately, I like what they're doing right now, and I want to say this was the most surprising game of the week, but I think the next game that we're going to get to, Saskatchewan Edmonton, might have surprised me a bit more.
Yeah, I love this. And if Taylor Powell gets the Ticats here to the playoffs, and it was kind of the same thing where we had Aaron Rodgers go down for the Jets, and everyone's like, well, if they make it to the playoffs, like, Aaron Wilson's gonna. It's like, if Zach Wilson gets the Jets to the playoffs, like, Zach Wilson's probably going to be playing in the playoffs. Like, if by God's will, Taylor Powell here, gets the Ticats in, like, I don't know how you bring, rusty ass Bo back after 18 whatever weeks. They're like, all right, Bo, get in here. Like, Jason, what did you make of this? Because, Taylor Prout had a pretty pedestrian game here. I mean, all things considered, obviously Winnipeg and the interceptions, their D really taking over. We talked about the missed field goal or the missed extra point that for some ungodly reason, there's only 2 points going the other way, which I don't understand. What did you make? What did you attribute Hamilton's victory to?
Well, I think there's certain things and elements of this Ticats team that are coming together over the last month or so. The connection and chemistry between Taylor Powell and Tim White. Tim White, over the last month, has been arguably the best receiver in the CFL. We saw that last year where he had a slow first half of the season and then really turned it on. So that's good to see. I think they've had a commitment to the run that they have not shown, over the last several years. When they had Tommy Condell as the offensive coordinator, they've really committed to the run. And James Butler, even though James Butler, I think, averaged under 4 yards per carry in this one, they committed to him, gave him like 22 carries, I think it was. So that's good to see. I think, they had really good commitment to stopping the run in this one. Brady Oliveira, who was really just chewing everybody up in the running game throughout this season, was kind of shut down in this one. So that was really good to see from the Ticats. I think there's elements of this team that have improved steadily the last several weeks, and they're peaking at the right time. And the Ticats, it's worth noting, they've always kind of been a second half of the season type of team. I think there was one year where they were like 1-7 and they finished 9-9. I forget what year exactly that was, sometime in the last 10 years, but they've been a second half of the season type of team before. So maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but given how poorly the first half of this season went, I definitely was not expecting this, especially the victories against Winnipeg and BC a couple weeks ago.
Well, I mean, and I know that numbers, I don't know. I'm just looking at the standings here. Like, if you had told me that it's a 3-game swing between the Ticat season and the BC Lions season, I feel like Hamilton, we're poo-pooing every week, and the end of the world and welfare checks on Jason, and then you look here, BC's got 3 more wins. It's not it's really not that big. I mean, all things considered here, and I know the divisions and all of that they're playing, but it does feel interesting. I had a tweet here, a friend of the show, Rod Peterson, who I guess plug, will be on Rod's show this Friday coming up, talking, and I got to get the XFL guy on again. We got XFL news, but Rod is saying the good times are over for the Bombers. I like this hashtag for the L. Evan, Bombers, this has been the least dominant season we've lived through them. And I mean, obviously they're still kicking the crud out of many teams, but kind of a different world. What do you make of Winnipeg?
Well, I don't know if the good times are over. I think once we get to the playoffs, we might see a different level of aggression from this team. And hell, I mean, we've already seen a good chunk of aggression from them at times this season. I mean, look at the, I guess it was Banjo Bowl against Saskatchewan, 51-6. They came out there and, destroyed that team. We all know that they're still capable of doing that, but there has been several times this season where Winnipeg has looked, I guess you would say, uncharacteristic. I don't think they're as complete as they were on the previous, Grey Cup runs. And again, doesn't mean they're a bad team. I still feel like they could easily, go back, and we might be seeing them in November in Hamilton. I don't think that's out of the question at all. But it's, they have lost a couple games where you do scratch your head and you wonder, will they let this happen when it really matters? You could say that about a couple other teams too, like BC. I think will be even more interesting when it comes time for playoffs. But yeah, I mean, Winnipeg right now, I feel like that there's still some questions, and again, that there's no denying. There's no denying. You're gonna get some people that say, well, the dynasty's over. Toronto will win again, and that's very. I feel like if Toronto does win this Grey Cup, if you're Winnipeg, you do have some bigger questions to answer in the offseason than maybe you anticipated. But right now, I know they've had a couple losses, and I know this game, again, was a surprise to a lot of people. But, it's not the end of the world, right? It was one of those days. And as Jason pointed out before, when Winnipeg travels to Hamilton, it seems that weird things just happen, and specifically for Caleros, I think weird things happen too. So I don't know. That can be debated, but me personally, I think Winnipeg's going to be fine.
I feel like I kind of have a trust factor here. And, I feel like if the Toronto Argonauts were a person, I have ultimate trust. You can watch my house while we're out of town, take care of our dog. I have total faith in that, 10 out of 10. Winnipeg is right there. I have zero faith in the BC Lions right now. I wouldn't, I would pay the BC Lions to stay away. I have zero trust in them. But just I just feel like where last year Winnipeg, there was just so many more like this is a guaranteed win, and the games that Winnipeg has dropped has been kind of surprising this year. Jason, what do you think? What is your trust factor of Winnipeg here?
Well, I do still trust them because I think a weird thing that I realized when I looked at their the last couple of years, they've played worse against the East than they have against the West. It seems like they really bring it, with the exception of the Labor Day game this year and that game earlier this year against BC. They've been pretty dominant against West Division opponents, which are ultimately the ones you're going to have to go through to get to the Grey Cup. So I feel pretty confident if BC and Winnipeg play in the playoffs this year. I would probably be taking Winnipeg, even if maybe it was in BC place. I probably would still go with Winnipeg. But I think at the end of the day, there are some cracks in this team that have not been shown over the past couple of years. They're giving up a lot of big plays on defense. They've had some pretty poor performances on defense this year that we haven't seen the last couple of years. So, that's concerning from that perspective. Zach Collaros has, I believe, 14 or 15 interceptions on the year. So that's pretty high. Had 3 of them in this one. That was really huge for the Ticats getting the win. So I think there definitely are some issues with the Bombers this year that we haven't seen in the past, but I think they're still one of the teams that I would just put them right behind Toronto right now as the second best team in the league still.
Yeah, spoiler alert, whatever home field advantage BC has, being inside in the dome or whatever, is pretty beneficial to both. I think Winnipeg's home field advantage, we're used to playing in the frozen tundra and you're not, our water bottles are frozen on the side of the sidelines. I think that, even if it wasn't BC plays, I think it's a wash then. I think that Winnipeg has the home field advantage. I think anyone kind of comes in there. Evan, other thoughts on this? I had where was my tweet here about, Sergio Castillo missing again. He's a friend of the show, been on, right? He was in the XFL, and, Curse of Mark Leggio is real, them letting him go. I'll be curious. I have Derek Taylor, voice of the Bombers, coming on this week on the bye. Curious to get his thoughts on kind of this collapse. Evan, any other thoughts on this and anything else on the game?
I don't think so. I'm really interested to talk about this next game between Edmonton and Saskatchewan. Had a lot of takeaways from that one.
All right, Jason, anything else from you? We'll go on.
Yeah, let's move on.
All right, so we have here Evan chomping at the bit to talk Edmonton Elks, the Saskatchewan Roughriders. This has to be at least the most points Edmonton's put on the entire season. I'll give Evan the floor here. You seem excited for this one.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for this one because, I've started to notice something that I think is really positive for Edmonton, and I haven't pointed it out on the show yet, but we talked at the top of the show about, how Ottawa has been unable to close games. Edmonton now has had a couple big fourth quarter rallies, and I feel like in this one it really stood out. Edmonton now, I think I projected them, having maybe 3 wins this season, and with this game they were able to surpass that. And keep in mind there's still 5-6 weeks left in the season, so they could very well win a couple more. I haven't looked at their schedule, haven't looked that far forward yet, but there were a lot of positives in this game from the Edmonton side of things. And the other really big takeaway on that side of the ball for the Elks that I had, Kevin Brown, man, he has really become the saving grace for this season. We've talked about Trey Ford ad nauseum. We've talked about Geno Lewis, and what he was hoping to bring to that team, being one of the top receivers in the league. But Kevin Brown has absolutely exploded. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe he's second in the CFL in rushing yards right now behind Brady Oliveira in Winnipeg. So, yeah, Kevin Brown, man, hats off to you. It's, what a fun player to watch, and really someone who, has been leading, I'd say, the offense. I mean, he had more rushing yards than Trey Ford had passing yards in this game. And now I just, I feel like I've been watching him the past couple weeks, and, he's doing all these really good things, but we haven't been giving him enough credit. Maybe it's because it's Edmonton, it's not necessarily a winning team. We're still focused on some of the drama and struggles that they've had before they've been able to win a couple games here in the second half of the season. But a lot of improvement, across the board. And Edmonton, continues to impress, which is not something I thought I would be saying, especially after all the midseason, shift between Victor Cui. I thought, they still might not be at a point where they're winning right now. But fortunately, they've been able to turn some things around again under the guidance of Trey Ford, and that continued against Saskatchewan in Regina, which was really surprising to me. I thought that Saskatchewan would win that game, and they do it, by a decent margin. But I guess not, And Saskatchewan now, they're. I don't want to say they're on a bit of a slump, but that whole ever since that Banjo Bowl loss where they got decimated by Winnipeg, I feel like they're still recovering from that a bit. And they didn't play poorly in this game. There was a lot, about this game that I thought, things still looked all right. Really, one of my main takeaways too, not necessarily about this game, but about Saskatchewan, is there was something brought up on the TSN broadcast. I forget which game it was, but it was about, looking at, quarterbacks for next year, what some of the top options might be. And, Drew Brown was brought up in Winnipeg. Obviously, he's played a bit this season in place of Zach Collaros. But the guy that I can't stop thinking about here is Jake Dolegala and the impression that he's made over the past couple weeks. Obviously, Mason Fine gets hurt. You're going to Dolegala. No one's really sure what's going to happen. He's kind of an unproven guy. But he's come in and he's been really impressive, week after week. And even in this loss, still had 3 touchdown passes. I really wonder, because I think Trevor Harris will come back to Saskatchewan next year. And that kind of, begs the question, is Jake Dolegala going to stay and take that reserve role behind a veteran guy? Or, is he ready now to kind of, go on to another team, find a new opportunity and, start for a quarterback needy team, wherever that may be. Obviously, I think there'll be a couple teams that, could be in that position if they don't feel confident about who's there now. So I feel like Jake Dolegala could definitely challenge a couple guys at this point, and he'll be an interesting name to watch going forward into 2024.
You're talking here, Edmonton, and you said, looking at their schedule ahead and whatever. I'll tell you, next week, BC at Edmonton. I would not be surprised at all if Edmonton beats BC at home. At all. I completely think that's possible. Jason, thoughts on that? BC here going into Edmonton. I like I said, my faith on BC is about a negative 0.5.
Yeah, I think the way that Edmonton is playing right now, they could beat almost any team in the CFL. I mean, they have such unique formula right now in terms of running the ball. They're averaging almost 200 yards a game since Trey Ford took over as the starting quarterback, which are basically just like video game or college football like numbers. And that's just really impressive. And I mean, it's hard to consistently win like that in the CFL. Right now it's working. And I mean, when it comes to the Elks and their, hopes of making the playoffs, I mean, I just don't see a way that they get in because of that tiebreaker that they lost to Saskatchewan. I think back to that 12-11 game earlier this season with the one, if that game goes the way, that Edmonton a tiebreaker right now and only 1 game behind Saskatchewan. So, I mean, if they just had 1 less loss right now, they'd be right in the thick of things. But I think, 10 losses, it's just a little bit too far behind to catch up unless they somehow run the table here.
Yeah, I playoffs or not, I think they're going to make life really messy here. And I mean, I'll tell you, tracking the Mariners here, and we, at the time, I think we were in second in the division, going into Kansas City, who is it bounces between the worst or the second to worst team in the the league. I mean, they ran us to extra innings every night, and they, hey, we love playing spoiler here, and we're still professionals, and we got a lot to do. I just if I'm BC. You cannot go into that game sleep blocking here at this point. We need to keep up whatever was found in this comeback. Yeah, who would have thought the comeback victory against the Ottawa and Dustin Crum? United you need to kind of keep that going. Evan, similar question to you about Elks here against BC as we're looking forward.
Well, you can't rule it out. I would say maybe it's upset alert, especially after that. Again, tremendously close game that BC played against, Ottawa. I do feel like BC is a bit overconfident sometimes, and I think that's been the reason to blame on a lot of their losses this season. And I know you've brought up Reed, Rick Campbell, the way that he kind of goes about himself and sort of handling, the team in those situations where they lose. A lot of it, I know you've said, talking about move on to the next game or whatever, and you want them to sort of reflect on things and think about it. But I don't know. I feel like, we don't need that much negativity, right? Like
You
BC
need to
is
think
still,
about it. You need to take that loss. You need to think about it.
hey man, I get it. Look, I understand, there are some frustrations, and BC, is far from perfect. They definitely have slowed down a bit, I think, in the second half of the season compared to their hot start. But I will say, BC, again, despite everything that's gone on with them, I still feel like they are an extremely strong team. And again, it's one of those situations where you look at experience and personnel and the combination of those two. I feel like BC, if they do lose this game against Edmonton, which I'm not going to rule it out, I feel like there's a chance for anything to happen. If they were to lose that game to Edmonton, I would start to question some of the things I have said. But I think for now, yes, even with the Ottawa game, even with the couple games before that were really close and were, what you could call inexcusable losses, I still feel like this team is in a prime position to go into Edmonton and, hey, maybe go beat them by 30. Who knows, right? Like Edmonton, as much credit as we've given them, I don't think it's going to take much to find their weak spot or their soft spot. And, then they could just go back to the way things have been, or the way things were at the beginning of the season. So, it goes both ways, right? And I feel like every game, there's no guarantees, especially in a league like this where, teams are meeting each other so many times during the season and it's so long. I mean, you have an opportunity, to really beat everybody. It's not like the NFL where, you're not playing every team, every season. So, that's something to keep in mind. I think, I understand, there is some worry about BC. And again, they're another team where if they don't get it done this year, do you think about maybe making some significant adjustments? I mean, me personally, I like what they have. I don't think you change anything, even if they do, if they don't advance to the Grey Cup this year. But you certainly have to consider it, right? They've been so close now for what feels like a while. And you just watch them this season, and there's times where you think they can do it, and there's other times where you feel like they're still right at the edge. And if there's one little thing that goes off, then maybe that could just derail things. Because I will say one of the things with BC too, my last point about this, which is a bit random, but I'll point it out anyway. Like I noticed this against Ottawa, and it happened like in the Toronto game too. That was a long time ago now, but BC, at least on offense, or especially with Vernon, it seems like sometimes, they make a mistake and then they just can't really get over it. Vernon, it's like if he throws an interception, well, he's going to throw two more after that because I think he sometimes struggles to get over that hurdle. And whether that's just, just mental or just not, recognizing to certain things, not moving off the play quick enough and, making decisions because your mind's not in the right place. Like, I don't know. I'm not in his head. And again, he's still a very good quarterback. That's nothing against Vernon. I just think, that's something that I've noticed in a couple games where BC's lost, where it's like they have one little mistake where, it's not going to end the game or anything. And you can easily move off that, get the ball back, go score a touchdown. But then suddenly everyone goes into panic mode. And it's like, okay, like we have to start making all these adjustments. And I'm like, you just got to, keep it together, stay collected. I think if they, just stayed true to that a bit and kind of rode things out, like I've seen other teams where it's like they make a mistake, but then they just, they don't, they just keep going. They don't think about that, and it takes them a bit of time to, get back into things. But those teams, will find ways to make a game competitive, and even if they don't always win, those are still some of the better teams in the league. So I know that's a lot. I know that's a bit of a tangent, and definitely some weird niches in there, everything that I've just explained. But I feel like that's all important, because BC is one of these teams where people are really eager to see what happens. And they're, again, like, they're one of the best in the CFL, but are they Winnipeg good? Are they Toronto good? We don't know. We got to figure that out. So we'll see.
Two questions here I'll ask Jason kind of back to back. And I hate, I know we're talking a lot of BC, but we're kind of midweek here, and we're, we'll hit the last game and we'll get out of here. I was talking with, obviously we had some of the BC social team down here last week, going to the Mariner game, and we're talking, and, can't wait for Grey Cup next year. And oh my God, it's going to be so exciting and whatever. And like, every team kind of has a window, right, that they're going to win. And, I know Buffalo Bills, right, is your NFL team, I think. And like their window is very shrinking right now. And their window might have already shrunk, but like, you had the work thing, and then you have Vernon. Like, it's not like Vernon's the problem, right? It's not like the receivers are the problem. Like the defense, some of the time, like what do you attribute? Like if they don't make it this year, what do they do going into next year? Like to be in, to host, like the game's going to be there. Like I don't know how you extend this window more than what they're doing, except just Winnipeg is that much better.
I think that the running game is a big, separating factor from them and Winnipeg. I think, BC's, I think, the worst team in terms of running the ball this year. I would guess that Winnipeg is number one or right up there as the number one team running the ball. That's a massive problem between these two teams, especially if BC has to go on the road in the playoffs to Winnipeg. That's just an element that's completely missing from their game. And I think as much as the CFL is a passing league, I think you still do need to have that change-up element. And I mean, maybe you bring back James Butler. We're pretty happy with him in Hamilton, but I think, a guy like him, they really missing from this offense. And I think, that's something that BC just doesn't have right now. And I mean, I feel like, sometimes they're just not, awake to a lot of these games. They kind of play down to their opponents. So, I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see how their season shakes out, because I think, excuse me, I think that, they're right in the thick of things. They easily could make the Grey Cup this season, but I also could see them, getting blown out in the West Final. I think the variance with them is very high.
Like, I just don't, I get that. Like, they're sleepwalking, they're I'm like, I don't know what else you're wanting to do at this point. Like, I feel like, you're in the CFL and like, the money's fine and it's not great. And we've had all, the discussions that, the XFL and all football and like, you're there. Like, I would want to kick ass and take names. And like, I just don't understand some of these weeks. Like you said, they show up and like, I feel like I'm sitting there and, I'm throwing my remote through the TV and like, I'm more passionate than it feels like. And I know that that's not the case. And I'm given, 1% of the effort that they're doing every week. It just doesn't always translate on the field that way. My other question, Jason, then we'll get Evan's thoughts. Chris Jones, it was like fire Chris Jones, and I have this football database. It was just kind of interesting. Like if you look, Oliveira, obviously like 1,200 yards. We got, Taekwon Misel, half the rushing yards, lead rusher here for BC. People calling for Chris Jones's head earlier, and I can't remember which guest I was talking about on the podcast last week, but like, Chris Jones could be like coach of the year now with the turnaround. Like, Jason, what do you make of that? And then we'll get Evan's thoughts, like how Jones is doing now that we finally played Trey Ford.
It's so weird. Like, I mean, as you said, if we had this conversation a month ago, I'd be like, everybody would have expected that Chris Jones would be let go at the end of the season. But oddly, in a way, I mean, the decision to not start Trey Ford for a long time could be a reason to fire him. But also the fact that he drafted Trey Ford in the first place showed that he had faith in him in the first place. And I mean, I just don't know what was going on earlier this year. I think they were, a little bit, committed to Cornelius because of that guaranteed portion of his contract next year. But I think at the end of the day, maybe with this strong second half of the season, Chris Jones is, going to be safe in terms of his head coaching job here in Edmonton, because, I mean, I think it's kind of going in the right direction now. They've kind of found a formula on how to win, and you're starting to see a lot of these pieces come together, and I feel like they're going to be a very exciting team next year if we have the same nucleus together.
Evan, same thoughts on that, and then we'll get to the last game. I mean, Jones is like, we're gushing over Edmonton here. We're a couple weeks ago, well, I guess like a month ago now, it certainly wasn't the case.
Yeah, it's mixed feelings. I mean, I think we've talked ad nauseum about, Edmonton's turnaround and how staggering that this really is, in the second half of the season. I mean, it's two different teams, but the one thing that I can't get over, and I'm not saying – I'll say this much. I think Chris Jones' job is safe now. I feel like at this point, it's just a lot easier to go into the offseason and build with him, knowing that you've now won a couple games and there is actually something there despite everything that happened earlier. But I just can't get over the fact that for so long, we said, like, the only thing that team really needed to do was, get Cornelius out of the lineup and insert Ford instead. And, in the back of my mind, I always thought that there was maybe a bit more than that, but there really wasn't. Once Trey Ford came in, it was a completely different game. Again, it was 2 different seasons. And it's just staggering to see, like, it was such a simple adjustment that wasn't made that early. And to be honest, I mean, I think, maybe we all agree here, but had Trey Ford started at the beginning of this season, Edmonton might be, competing for certain spots in the West. I mean, they might be up there, winning big games on a weekly basis, and they would have never even got to that, home losing streak record or whatever, because they probably could have just taken care of that earlier. Again, it's just such a weird kind of dynamic. And I think this is one thing, regardless of, what happens to Edmonton here in the next couple of weeks. This is one of the things that I will remember most about the 2023 CFL season was not having Trey Ford play earlier, because again, like, that's all it really took. They have not made any major adjustments. Like, yes, there was a couple things on the coaching side, I suppose, but again, I just can't believe that, like, we were sitting there, literally calling for Trey Ford's name, and then he started, and then it was like everything was fixed. Everyone was happy again. And, I almost feel bad for a guy like Victor Cui, where the second he left the organization, everything started, being great again. They won a home game. They won other games. Trey Ford was the talk of the town in the CFL and still is to a great extent. One of those players where it's a new highlight every week. And, just to not, do that earlier and to possibly cost your team a spot in the playoffs. I mean, I think there's going to be people that, go both directions when it comes to, Chris Jones and where he stands, like whether he should be there next season or not. Again, I think he should be, just because, like, if you get rid of him, that removes everything that you've built in the second half of this season. And I understand, it's been difficult, right? And you can't forget what happened, for all those games, that they lost at the beginning of the season where it looked hopeless. You can't forget about that. But, at the end of the day, like, if they, get rid of Chris Jones, he wears so many hats. Like, who else are you going to bring in to replace all that? I don't think they can afford really to go through another rebuild. I mean, hell, it just seems like yesterday when, Jaime Elizondo was the head coach, and it was a completely different team. But, to get rid of all that again, I just don't think that's a good idea now that they've at least won a couple games.
Didn't I have Stephen Dunbar on the podcast, and he was talking about, like, I love Chris Jones and the guys, because I said, like, was there ever any doubt of any of that? I will say, it's kind of like the Elks winning once Victor Cui left. It's kind of like if you're, like, maybe, like, dating someone and it's kind of wrong, and then you break up, and then you end up getting a new job, or you move on with your life and do something good. Like, was that because of the past relationship, or was it in spite of the past relationship? Kind of curious where that goes. Let's get into this last game, because then we'll flip the channel here. We'll start the new stream. We'll get on to XFL. This probably least surprising game, maybe just because it was close. I mean, Alouettes here really seem to be on the slide. Jason, thoughts on this one? I mean, Toronto comes in, takes care of business, and moves out.
Well, I would argue this is the worst game that Toronto's played the entire season to this point, yet they still were able to claw their way back and win it at the end of this game. And I mean, both teams had a sloppy first half. It was pretty low scoring, but Montreal in particular really got it going in the third quarter of this game. They had, I think, a 7-point lead late in the fourth quarter. Toronto was able to tie it up. They had a situation where they were 3rd and 3 from their own 8-yard line, and then Toronto went for it. They get a big pass interference call on DeMonte Coxey, and that springboards the game-tying drive. And then the next drive, when it's tied up at 20, Fajardo throws a killer interception, and that leads to the game-winning field goal for Toronto. But Montreal was able to get the ball back with a little bit of time left, get into field goal position, and they get their field goal blocked on the last play. So heartbreaker for the Alouettes. They let one slip away here, but I think Toronto, it really shows, even if they're not playing well, they can still win a lot of games in this league.
Yeah, very reminiscent here. A blocked field goal of a different Toronto blocked field goal player, maybe a little bit more infamous one from last year at the Grey Cup. Evan, what's wrong with my friend Cody Fajardo?
I don't know. In this game, I'm not even a Montreal fan, but my heart kind of sank when he threw that interception on that, that second to last drive. I watched that entire game, and the entire time I thought Montreal was going to win. I said, this is their chance. Toronto, they've won. Obviously, they win all the time, but that game, like, it just felt like their opportunity. They've played Toronto, like, this was the third time that they played Toronto this season, and they had an opportunity to take down one of probably the best team in the CFL right now, arguably at home, in Montreal in front of their great fan base, and they couldn't do it, and they were so close too. That's the part that just really hurts. Like I'm not a Montreal fan. I'm not connected to that city in any way, but I with the second Fajardo, threw that pick, which was a really bad pick, by the way. It was kind of like a face palm. I'm like, and that's your game. Yeah, I know Montreal was able to get the ball back and, obviously have an opportunity to tie. They weren't able to do that with the field goal block, but it really felt like, Fajardo was just going to drive down the field right there and put the game away with a touchdown, and that was going to be it. Toronto wasn't even going to have a chance, to do any of that, and there wasn't going to be need for overtime or anything. But, it happens. It happens, and the reality is, it's just it's another week of you question, Cody Fajardo and where he's at, and I mean, I still think there's a lot of promise there. He hasn't looked terrible this season, but again, Montreal for like what feels like the millionth time is unable to beat somebody superior to them. And I understand Toronto's a tough task, but it was right there for the taking. It felt like Toronto played so slowly that they were just giving Montreal these opportunities, and while they took advantage of some of them, it wasn't enough, and that's all that really matters at the end of the day. People are just going to look at the final score and think, oh, well, Montreal drops another one to a top opponent. And then we're right back to our discussion last week about, where does this team stand going into the playoffs and what is it going to look like them, obviously going into next season. They've already kind of their big period of adjustment happened last year. They shifted a lot of things, including ownership. So I think they're just going to stick with what they have now. But there's just got to be some sort of mindset change. I feel like this is a team, a team that can't beat people above them, that beats everybody below them. Like, that's the definition of content, right? It kind of just feels like they've stagnated. And it sucks because I thought this was, again, the game where Montreal was going to get over the hump and they were going to really, make a statement, especially, again, late in the season. You've played Toronto. I guess this was the third time they played each other. You want to close out that, strong, and they just couldn't do it. They just couldn't do it. And yeah, it is what it is. There was a lot, again, like they showed plenty of promise in this game. Tyson Philpott, who was one of the greater stories coming into the league, Canadian, I believe, had a nice game. Kind of the first time we've really been able to talk about him this season. And, again, but it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. And I know Montreal's going to go to the playoffs. I get it. Like, they'll be fine. They can, ride things out. But it's difficult. It's difficult. And I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm at on it now. It sucks.
Yeah, like you said, you said, well, I saw Cody throw that terrible pick, and it's like, they're always terrible. Like, they're always terrible. Like, it's always in double coverage or this is bad, whatever. Jason, I'll give you the final stand here, and then we'll get out of here and we'll reset. XFL stream coming on at 4:45 Pacific, 7:45 Eastern. We're going to reset here and hop over to that stream. What do you got, Jason?
Yeah, so I think the big takeaway I have from this game and the big takeaway I have from the weekend in general is because they lost this game and Hamilton won on Saturday, they're now tied. And now, Hamilton's in that conversation for that home playoff game as we go down the stretch here. Montreal still has that tiebreaker. That didn't look like it was possible before this week, but now it looks like it's definitely a possibility.
It should be exciting. I mean, people always poo-poo the East. I don't know. I like this year. I like Winnipeg dropping some. I like there being just a little bit more than, Winnipeg's 10-1 and going through, our Argos here are still kind of the one outlier of that. But I think otherwise than that, I think kind of anybody can at least keep it close. We just talked about kind of Ottawa and BC and kind of all that stuff. Late episode here this week. Jason, are you going to be doing a preview coming up on your channel?
Yep, I'll be dropping one probably by tomorrow night. I also have another video tomorrow, so there'll be 2 videos coming out on my channel. Most likely tomorrow I'm going to be doing just a full-out examination of the playoffs, all the different scenarios, as we have like 5 games left in the season for each team. So check that out on my channel.
Well, it should be exciting. Like I said, Evan's going to hop over with me. We'll put the, go to the YouTube. It's up on there, pinned on. I'll pin it on Twitter if you want to do that as well. Talking XFL, USFL merger. Evan's going to be there. We're going to have Anthony Miller joining us. Mike Mitchell is going to be coming on live. And then, we'll take comments, and if people want to hop on and kind of talk through that stuff as well. We'll probably go for, hour 15 or so. And then we got a big like trivia party thing tonight I got to go to. So check out Jason's stuff. Thanks, guys. Like I said, making time this week and late and everything else, but we did it. what is it, week 15 here in the book. So we'll see you guys next time.